Strategic design. The Shibuya incident is not a spontaneous curse outbreak. It is a deliberately engineered operation planned over several years with one singular objective: the permanent removal of Satoru Gojo from the world. As long as Gojo exists, no large-scale curse plan can succeed. His presence alone maintains balance. Therefore, the Shibuya incident is structured not as a war, but as a trap designed to force Gojo into a no-win situation. The architect of this plan is Kenjaku, operating while possessing the body of Suguru Geto. Kenjaku understands that Gojo cannot be defeated through direct combat. Instead, the plan exploits Gojo's greatest weakness: his responsibility towards civilians. Every component of the incident is designed to limit Gojo's freedom of action while maximizing civilian exposure. On October 31st, around 7 p.m., the Shibuya incident begins when a large curtain is cast over the area, centered on the Tokyo department store. The barrier traps non-sorcerers. Civilians can enter but cannot leave, while Jujutsu sorcerers are allowed to pass through freely. It also blocks cell phone reception and cannot be destroyed by force, only dispelled by eliminating its caster. As civilians gather demanding Satoru Gojo, the advanced barrier signals the return of the same enemies from the Goodwill event, prompting the higher-ups to send Gojo in alone, while other sorcerers secure the perimeter outside. Shibuya is chosen not for symbolic reasons, but for efficiency. It is one of the most densely populated districts in Tokyo, filled with underground stations, narrow corridors, and multi-level structures. These conditions prevent large-scale techniques and create constant civilian proximity. From the moment the barriers are activated, the area becomes an enclosed environment where any reckless action results in mass death. This is not collateral damage. It is the core mechanism of the trap. The plan relies on a precise psychological calculation. Gojo will not abandon civilians, even if doing so would make victory easier. The curses do not need to defeat him. They only need to delay him long enough for the sealing process to activate. Once Gojo is removed, the balance of the Jujutsu world collapses automatically, allowing chaos to spread unchecked. This is the moment the Shibuya incident truly begins, not as a battle, but as a controlled execution of a long-prepared strategy. The barriers activate. The operation becomes irreversible the moment the veils fully lock into place around Shibuya. These barriers are not just walls. They are rule-based zones that decide who can enter, who can leave, and what kinds of Jujutsu responses are even possible. The civilians trapped inside are not incidental victims. They are the mechanism that forces Gojo to fight with his hands tied. The first effect is mass civilian congestion. Shibuya Station is packed with people who have no idea what Jujutsu is, no way to see cursed spirits, and no concept of why exits are suddenly sealed. When panic begins, the crowd behavior becomes predictable. People press toward bottlenecks, pile into tunnels, and create dense human blocks. For Gojo, that matters because his strongest options require space. Even if a technique would only target curses, the physical shockwaves, debris, and structural collapse would still slaughter non-sorcerers. The second effect is information distortion. Jujutsu headquarters cannot see inside the barrier clearly and cannot move freely within it. This causes an immediate delay in decision-making. Teams are dispatched, but the incident is built to fragment those teams and prevent coordination. The entire Shibuya layout becomes a maze of sealed routes, blocked stairwells, and redirected corridors. Even experienced sorcerers can't take direct lines to targets. The third effect is the creation of a Gojo-only zone. The curses are not trying to eliminate every sorcerer first. They are trying to isolate the one sorcerer who changes the rules of reality. The barrier network ensures that when Gojo enters, he becomes the only meaningful responder inside the deepest layer. Everyone else is either locked out or forced to approach through slower, more dangerous ways. This is why the curses announce their terms so openly. They demand Gojo's presence at Shibuya Station. It is bait, but it is bait designed for a man who cannot refuse. If Gojo stays away, civilians die. If he enters, the sealing operation becomes possible. Either outcome serves the curses. This is where the massacre's design becomes apparent. In a typical Jujutsu battle, civilians are evacuated from the field. In Shibuya, they are bound to it. The curses deliberately create a situation where even Gojo, at his safest, is forced to hesitate, to hold back, and to fight while shielding people who are completely defenseless. Gojo enters Shibuya Station. When Satoru Gojo enters Shibuya Station, the final phase of the trap begins. The curses are no longer testing him or scouting his reactions. From this moment forward, every action is calibrated to slow him down by seconds at a time. The station itself becomes a pressure chamber. Narrow platforms, low ceilings, train tunnels, and stairways packed with civilians who cannot see the threats around them. Immediately, cursed spirits begin attacking from within the crowd. These are not high-level opponents. They exist to create chaos, force Gojo to move, and occupy his attention. Gojo prioritizes speed and precision, eliminating threats with minimal output while physically repositioning civilians away from danger. Every rescue costs time. Every civilian death that happens within his sight is another psychological weight added to the equation. The disaster curses then reveal themselves. Jogo, Hanami, and Choso coordinate their attacks rather than engaging individually. Their goal is not damage, it is obstruction. They attack from multiple directions, forcing Gojo to divide his focus between suppressing them and shielding civilians from stray attacks. A key technique introduced here is domain amplification. By coating their bodies in a neutralized domain field, the curses temporarily bypass Gojo's infinity. This allows them to physically touch him, something almost no opponent can do. However, even stripped of infinity, Gojo remains overwhelmingly superior. His raw physical ability, cursed energy reinforcement, and reaction speed allow him to dominate close-range combat. Hanami is destroyed not through a flashy technique, but through sustained pressure. Gojo crushes Hanami's core by forcing cursed energy beyond its structural limit, killing a disaster curse without relying on his signature abilities. This moment confirms that the curses cannot win by trading blows. Their window is closing, and they know it. At this stage, civilian casualties are escalating. The station is filling with bodies, injured survivors, and cursed corpses. Gojo realizes that the situation cannot continue indefinitely. If he keeps fighting at this pace, civilians will continue to die simply from proximity to the conflict. He prepares a decisive action, not to win the fight, but to reset the battlefield, the 0.2-second domain. Faced with a battlefield that cannot be stabilized through conventional combat, Satoru Gojo makes a calculation no other sorcerer could attempt. A full domain expansion would permanently incapacitate every non-sorcerer within range. Doing nothing guarantees continued civilian deaths. Gojo chooses a third option, precision beyond precedent. He activates Unlimited Void for 0.2 seconds.
領域展開無料空所
This fraction of a second is long enough to overload the minds of cursed spirits and transfigured humans, rendering them immobile, but short enough to avoid irreversible damage to civilians. The act requires perfect timing, perfect output control, and perfect spatial awareness. It is not just a display of power, but of restraint. In that instant, every hostile entity in the immediate area collapses, and the station falls unnaturally silent. The problem is not the domain itself. The problem is what happens immediately after. As Gojo releases Unlimited Void and lowers his guard to reassess the battlefield, Kenjaku appears, wearing the face of Suguru Geto. The sight forces a moment of hesitation.
Yeah, Satoru.
Not because Gojo doubts the threat, but because Geto is supposed to be dead. The emotional dissonance is instantaneous and fatal. That hesitation satisfies the final condition for the activation of the prison realm. The prison realm does not overpower Gojo. It exploits a rule. The target must remain within range and mentally fixed on a single moment long enough for the seal to complete. Kenjaku engineers that moment perfectly. Gojo recognizes the truth, that this is not Geto, but the realization comes too late. The prison realm activates, binding Gojo within a sealed space that freezes him in time. Even then, Gojo resists. The cursed object physically shakes under the strain of his will. For a brief moment, it appears as though the seal might fail entirely, but the mechanism holds. With Gojo sealed, The structural balance of the Jujutsu world collapses instantly. This is the true point of no return. The curses have succeeded, not through strength, but through patience and psychological manipulation. The strongest sorcerer alive is removed from the board, and every contingency built around his presence becomes obsolete. Shibuya is no longer a battlefield that can be controlled. It is now an open killing zone. The aftermath of Gojo's sealing. The moment Satoru Gojo is sealed, the entire operational structure of Jujutsu Society collapses. Gojo is not merely a frontline combatant. He is the emergency solution to every worst-case scenario. With him removed, all existing response plans become invalid within seconds. There is no replacement asset capable of stabilizing the situation. Communication from within Shibuya becomes fragmented. Barrier interference, civilian interference, and the sudden spike in cursed energy disrupt coordination between teams. Sorcerers on the ground are forced to make independent decisions with incomplete information. Command directives shift from containment to damage mitigation, a subtle but devastating downgrade in objectives. Inside the sealed zones, cursed spirits immediately escalate their aggression. The disaster curses no longer need to restrain themselves. Their objective has changed from delay to destruction. Areas previously kept intact for tactical reasons are now abandoned. Structural damage increases rapidly as curses prioritize movement freedom over stealth. Outside the barriers, sorcerer teams scramble to breach entry points. Yuji Itadori, Megumi Fushiguro, Nanami Kento, Maki Zenin, and others are redeployed with a new priority: recover Gojo if possible, but survive if not. This change matters. It signals that Jujutsu leadership already understands the severity of what has occurred. The curses anticipate this response. Veteran curse users, fighters pushed into irrelevance by Gojo's existence, are stationed at barrier control points. Their role is not to win decisively, but to stall and injure incoming sorcerers. Even minor delays compound rapidly, allowing cursed spirits inside Shibuya to roam more freely and hunt without opposition. At the same time, Kenjaku begins repositioning assets. The incident has progressed faster than expected, but not beyond control. With Gojo sealed, Kenjaku no longer needs to micromanage events. Shibuya is now a live experiment, a pressure test to see how the world behaves without its strongest stabilizing force. For the sorcerers on the ground, this realization is devastating. They are no longer fighting to restore order. They are fighting to prevent total collapse, one street and one station at a time. The battle to break the veils. With Satoru Gojo sealed and command authority fractured, the remaining sorcerers are forced into a high-risk recovery operation under combat conditions. The immediate tactical objective becomes clear: destroy the veil anchors controlling Shibuya. These anchors are physical focal points that maintain the barrier's rules. As long as they remain intact, movement is restricted, reinforcements are delayed, and civilians remain trapped. Teams are split and assigned to different anchor locations, knowing full well that this will isolate them. This is not an ideal strategy. It is desperation. The environment heavily favors ambushes, and cursed spirits exploit this by funneling sorcerers into narrow routes where retreat is impossible. Every engagement drains manpower that cannot be replaced. At the anchor sites, the sorcerers encounter curse users from an earlier era, fighters who once terrorized Jujutsu Society but were forced into obscurity by Gojo's birth. These individuals are not refined or modernized, but they compensate with experience and cruelty. Their techniques are inefficient but lethal, designed to maim, delay, and bleed opponents rather than overwhelm them quickly. The most destabilizing event during this phase is the forced resurrection of Toji Fushiguro through a seance technique. Unlike traditional revivals, Toji returns without restraint or allegiance. His body operates purely on instinct, targeting the strongest presence in his vicinity. This immediately disrupts both curse and sorcerer formations. Toji's existence violates the fundamental assumptions of Jujutsu combat. With no cursed energy, he bypasses detection and domain mechanics, relying entirely on physical dominance and weapon mastery. He annihilates special-grade threats inside their own domains, proving that cursed techniques are not absolute. However, his rampage also increases civilian casualties and structural destruction, further destabilizing Shibuya. By the time several veils are partially dismantled, the damage is irreversible. Teams are injured, scattered, or dead. Civilians continue to die in large numbers. The battlefield has expanded beyond control, and the Shibuya incident transitions from an operation with objectives into a citywide collapse driven by momentum alone. At this point, the curses no longer need to win individual fights. The system itself is breaking. Dagon's Domain. Following Satoru Gojo's sealing, the final unawakened disaster curse, Dagon completes his evolution and enters the battlefield. Previously underestimated, Dagon immediately proves his threat by confronting Nanami Kanto, Maki Zenin, and Nyobito Zenin. Dagon activates his domain expansion, Horizon of the Captivating Skanda. Transforming the battlefield into a closed oceanic space filled with guaranteed hit Shikigami attacks. The domain overwhelms through constant pressure rather than a single finishing blow, forcing the sorcerers into pure defense. Even with Nyobito's projection sorcery and Nanami's experience, the group is steadily worn down, showing how vulnerable even veteran sorcerers are without Gojo. The tide shifts briefly when Megumi Fushiguro enters and deploys an incomplete Chimera Shadow Garden, disrupting Dagon's guaranteed hit effect just enough to prevent immediate annihilation. The battle ends only with the arrival of Toji Fushiguro, who ignores domain rules entirely and kills Dagon through raw physical dominance. Dagon's defeat leaves the sorcerers devastated. Nyobito fatally injured, Maki critically wounded, Nanami pushed closer to death, and Megumi exhausted, removing the last experienced resistance just before Shibuya descends into total slaughter. Toji's final fight. After defeating Dagon, Toji Fushiguro encounters Megumi Fushiguro and immediately engages him. The fight is brutally one-sided. Toji overwhelms Megumi in close combat, easily breaking through his Shikigami and forcing him into retreat. Megumi survives only by constantly repositioning and using the environment to slow Toji down. As the chase continues, Megumi attempts to counter with calculated techniques, briefly creating openings through terrain and timing. Despite this, the gap in physical ability remains insurmountable. During the exchange, Toji begins recalling fragments of his past and realizes Megumi is his son. That realization halts the fight entirely. Understanding that his presence will only endanger Megumi's future, Toji chooses to end his own life. Rather than allow himself to remain a threat, he kills himself deliberately, bringing his reincarnation to a close. His death is quiet and final, leaving Megumi alive and removing one of the last uncontrollable forces rampaging through Shibuya.
全員じゃねえのか。よかったな。
Sukuna's forced awakening. As the veil-breaking operation destabilizes Shibuya, Yuji Itadori becomes the next critical variable in Kenjaku's plan. Yuji is deliberately targeted, not because he is strong, but because of what he contains. Through manipulation and coercion, Yuji is force-fed multiple fingers of Ryomen Sukuna, triggering Sukuna's full manifestation for an extended duration. This is not an accident or a side effect.
1秒やる。どけ。
It is an intentional escalation designed to convert Shibuya from controlled chaos into an irreversible catastrophe. Sukuna's emergence immediately overwrites all existing power hierarchies. Cursed spirits, curse users, and sorcerers alike recognize the same truth. Nothing present can restrain him. Sukuna does not act to assist Kenjaku or the disaster curses. He acts independently, driven by amusement and dominance. His first major engagement is with Jogo, who mistakenly believes that feeding Sukuna fingers will earn loyalty or favor. The resulting battle is not competitive. Sukuna dismantles Jogo's attacks with minimal effort, matching and surpassing him in elemental output before incinerating him completely. This fight exists solely to demonstrate the absolute gap between Sukuna and every other entity involved. Jogo, a disaster curse capable of leveling city blocks, is treated as disposable. Immediately after, Sukuna confronts Mahoraga, the uncontrollable Shikigami summoned through Megumi Fushiguro's 10 Shadows technique.
Makura.
Mahoraga's adaptive ability forces Sukuna to escalate strategically rather than emotionally. Recognizing that prolonged engagement allows adaptation, Sukuna deploys his domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine. Unlike conventional domains, Malevolent Shrine manifests without a closed barrier. Its effective range extends across a massive section of Shibuya, indiscriminately cutting everything within it. Buildings, streets, infrastructure, cursed spirits, and civilians are erased simultaneously. There is no targeting and no restraint. Thousands of people are killed in seconds. This is the single deadliest event of the entire incident. The human cost after Sukuna. When Sukuna relinquishes control, the battlefield does not reset. Shibuya is not frozen in time. Fires continue burning, buildings continue collapsing, and survivors are left wandering through a city that has effectively been erased. The massacre Sukuna caused is not confined to a single moment. It creates cascading deaths long after he disappears, as infrastructure failure, injuries, and panic finish what his domain expansion started. Yuji Itadori awakens in the center of this devastation. Unlike previous tragedies, there is no ambiguity here. Yuji understands exactly what happened, how it happened, and why he was powerless to stop it. This knowledge does not motivate him, it crushes him. His foundational belief that his life has value only if he can save others collapses under the weight of what he sees. Shibuya is not a few deaths. It is mass civilian extermination carried out through his body. Yuji does not have time to process this. The incident does not pause for grief. Sorcerers are still fighting. Civilians are still dying. And cursed spirits are still active throughout the city. Yuji continues moving, not because he believes he should, but because stopping would mean fully confronting the scale of his guilt. This mental state leaves him dangerously vulnerable. At the same time, Mahito begins the final phase of his personal objective. Mahito is no longer interested in victory or strategy. His sole focus becomes the complete psychological destruction of Yuji Itadori. Every action he takes from this point forward is designed to strip Yuji of meaning, agency, and resolve. This is no longer a clash of cursed techniques. It is a deliberate execution of hope. Nanami's final stand. Elsewhere in Shibuya, Nanami Kento continues fighting despite injuries that should already have killed him. His body is burned, fractured, and deteriorating rapidly because of Dagon and Jogo's aftermath. Yet Nanami refuses to retreat. He understands the stakes clearly. If he stops moving, younger sorcerers will die in his place. Nanami encounters waves of transfigured humans released by Mahito. These are civilians who have been forcibly reshaped into weapons, leaving Nanami with no option but to kill them. Each execution adds to the moral weight of his final moments. This is not heroic combat. It is forced atrocity committed to prevent worse outcomes. As Nanami pushes forward, he reflects on his past choices, his decision to return to Jujutsu, and his belief that adults exist to protect children from bearing the cost of the world. When he encounters Yuji again, Nanami does not speak at length. He simply entrusts the future to him. This is not encouragement, it is acceptance of death. Mahito appears immediately after. Without ceremony or resistance, Mahito transfigures Nanami in front of Yuji, killing him instantly. The timing is deliberate. Mahito waits until Nanami has fully committed to passing responsibility forward, then erases him to ensure Yuji witnesses the consequences. This death is not about Nanami. It is about breaking Yuji. Yuji's mind collapses under the combined weight of Sukuna's massacre and Nanami's execution. He freezes, loses coordination, and is overwhelmed by Mahito without resistance. This is the lowest psychological point of the Shibuya incident. Yuji does not believe he deserves to live, fight, or win. And Mahito knows it. Mahito versus Yuji. Mahito does not immediately kill Yuji. Instead, he explains himself. He tells Yuji that they are the same. They both kill humans, they both act on instinct, and that the only difference is perspective. Mahito frames cruelty as honesty and morality as self-deception. His objective is not to defeat Yuji's body, but to corrupt his identity. Yuji attempts to fight, but hesitates every time Mahito weaponizes transfigured humans. Yuji cannot bring himself to fully commit, and Mahito exploits that hesitation mercilessly. Each exchange reinforces the idea that compassion is weakness, and that Yuji's ideals are incompatible with survival in this world. This ideological assault is as damaging as any curse technique. Yuji is forced to confront the possibility that becoming stronger only means becoming more like Mahito. At this moment, the Shibuya incident stops being a citywide catastrophe and becomes a personal crucible. Todo's arrival. Aoi Todo enters the battlefield at the exact moment Yuji is about to give up entirely. He does not offer comfort. He does not deny Yuji's guilt. Instead, he reframes it. He explains that Jujutsu sorcerers do not fight because they are pure, but because someone must continue after others fall. He forces Yuji to stand, not by absolving him, but by reminding him that stopping now would make every prior death meaningless. This recontextualization does not heal Yuji, it stabilizes him. Yuji accepts that suffering is unavoidable, but that retreat guarantees worse outcomes. With Todo's support, Yuji re-engages Mahito, not as a savior, but as an executioner of necessity. Their combined assault pushes Mahito to his limits. For the first time, Mahito experiences fear, not of death, but of being denied the satisfaction of breaking Yuji. He evolves his technique further, transforming his body and pushing himself beyond previous limits. The fall of Mahito. As Yuji and Todo corner Mahito, the curse attempts to flee. His ideology collapses under pressure. When he can no longer dominate Yuji mentally, he abandons philosophy entirely and reverts to survival instinct. This inversion confirms Yuji's growth. Mahito is no longer the one in control. Yuji prepares to deliver the finishing blow, but before he can, Kenjaku intervenes. Kenjaku absorbs Mahito using cursed spirit manipulation, removing him from existence without granting Yuji closure. This act is not merciful, it is theft. Mahito's role is complete, and his death is reduced to resource acquisition. Yuji is denied the resolution he earned through suffering. Kenjaku then reveals the broader purpose of the Shibuya incident. Gojo's sealing was only the opening move. Using Mahito's idol transfiguration remotely, Kenjaku alters the brains of thousands of civilians across Japan, awakening dormant curse techniques and forcibly converting non-sorcerers into potential combatants. This transforms Shibuya from an isolated massacre into the catalyst for nationwide chaos. The aftermath. In the wake of the Shibuya incident, Kenjaku triggers the final stage of the catastrophe by releasing over 10 million cursed spirits across Japan. The destruction radiates outward from Shibuya, overwhelming all 23 wards of Tokyo and rendering the capital uninhabitable. Power, governance, and infrastructure collapse simultaneously, creating a literal void at the center of the country. Only a few regions, Okutama, Ume City, Akaruno City, Hachioji City, Machida City, and several islands remain relatively safe. Jujutsu sorcerers guard evacuation routes, as more than 5 million civilians are displaced, with no clear solution for relocation or long-term survival. As panic spreads, those with knowledge of the Jujutsu world debate emergency countermeasures. The economy is collapsing, the existence of cursed spirits can no longer be concealed, and Tokyo cannot be reclaimed. One proposal gains traction, expanding 2 massive barriers to the edge of the prefecture, one centered on the imperial residents from the Meiji era and the other around Tokyo Jujutsu High, turning both areas into permanently sealed uninhabited zones. Jujutsu headquarters responds not with reform, but with punishment. Suguru Geto is officially declared alive and sentenced to death. Satoru Gojo is labeled an accomplice to the incident and permanently exiled, with unsealing him deemed a criminal act. Due to his ties to both men, Masamichi Yaga is condemned to execution. The suspension of Yuji Itadori's death sentence is revoked, and Yuta Okotsu is appointed as his executioner. To prove his loyalty, Yuta accepts a binding vow after returning from overseas, publicly swearing to kill Yuji despite his personal ties to Gojo.
虎杖ユージは僕が殺します。
Power struggles erupt elsewhere. With Naobito Zenin dead, a clause in his will names Megumi Fushiguro as the next head of the Zenin clan if Gojo is incapacitated. This enrages Naoya Zenin, who plots Megumi's death and decides to hunt both him and Yuji, knowing Sukuna's vessel is already marked for execution. Amid the fallout, Yuji concludes he no longer belongs at Tokyo Jujutsu High. After failing to stop Kenjaku, Yuki Tsukumo admits she intervened too late and leaves to confront Tengen, leaving Yuji to choose his path. Choso, now convinced Yuji is his younger brother, stays with him. Together, they remain in the ruins of Shibuya, exorcising cursed spirits in a city that has already fallen, while the world quietly prepares to execute the boy who survived it.